Sidechain, sidechain, sidechain. What's up, fam? It's your boy Demuir here, purveyor of all sounds underground. Thank you for joining me today on my YouTube channel, where I will be sharing the topic of handling bass and the things that I've learned specifically. But before we jump into things, what I need from you is that SLC. Hit subscribe, like, comment, and more importantly, hit the notifications bell to stay in touch with the new videos that we have up and coming. So point number one, in terms of the things I've learned with bass, you want to make sure you cut out the things that you don't need. So less is more. So whenever I'm dealing with a bass synth or an acoustic bass or a sub bass, I try and cut out anything below 45 or 50 hertz in some occasions, depending on the sound. Really, having all of that rumble there is not necessarily good, and it's not necessarily replicated on the speakers in which you're playing these bass notes in the track. It actually just takes away energy from the mix overall when you come to think of it. Point number two is the sub is definitely there. I'm going to share with you an experience I had when I was mixing a hip-hop beat I was doing several years ago. And this engineer was much more experienced than I was at the time. And we were sitting in the studio and I was like, man, I can't even hear the sub bass. What's up with that? And he was like, you don't want to turn it up because it might feel like you can't hear it here. But because the frequency is so low that if you turn it up here, and when it actually gets played out on a speaker system that can play those bass notes, it's going to sound much louder than expected. And sure enough, I told him to turn it up. When I got home to play the track, it was overwhelming with the sub bass, and he must have had a huge laugh at the experience. And point number three is to respect the relationship. Often when I'm making tracks and I have a sample and there's a bass line in there that I've recreated either on my actual electric bass or on one of my machines here, I notice there's about a 3 dB relationship when it comes to those instruments versus sub bass, meaning the sub bass usually tends to be lower than the acoustic bass that I'm playing. So they can be playing the same bass notes, but most definitely there is a variation there where the sub bass needs to be a little bit lower. So it kind of dovetails off of the last point I shared with you in point two. But keeping in mind those relationships are there, let the sub bass play its part and let the acoustic bass or electronic bass play its own piece. So point number four is to sidechain, sidechain, sidechain. And where you want to sidechain when it comes to low frequencies is especially in the sub bass, but you also want to do it on an acoustic bass too, to make sure the kick cuts through all the time. Or use an LFO presented by the Transfer Group. It's a great plugin to use, or of course Track Spacer. We love this plugin on this channel. So make sure that you're sidechaining always when it comes to your bass frequency. And point number five, I actually learned this from Claude Von Stroke. There is a sort of a masterclass session that he had several years ago in a Music Tech magazine, and he was talking about his mixing engineer would oftentimes pull apart the bass notes. So certain notes that were at lower frequencies would get isolated to its own channel, and other bass notes would have a separate track and so forth. This is very helpful because sometimes when you're playing a bass line, it might contain extremely low bass notes that can't be heard if it's just on the one track where, let's say, the level is set at minus 6 dB. So by having it on its own separate track and EQing it specifically to be heard and sidechained as well, you have a much more comprehensive and pleasant type of bass that comes through. And there you have it. Those are my thoughts on the things I've learned when it comes to handling bass frequencies. Let me know your thoughts and please comment below, and be sure to hit the notifications bell and stay in touch with us. Much love and respect. Peace.